From $15 million to zero, that's the number people keep throwing around when they talk about Blueface right now, and whether that exact figure is real or not, it captures something everybody's been noticing. This is a guy who just a few years ago looked like he had absolutely everything. Hit records that wouldn't leave your head, viral moments that took over every timeline, boxing events that pulled in pay-per-view buys, reality TV drama that kept millions of people checking in week after week. For a stretch there, Blueface wasn't just a rapper, he was a walking content machine, and it felt like the money and the momentum were never going to stop. But here's where it gets real. After jail, after lawsuits, after years away from music while the industry kept moving without him, people are asking a different question now. Did Blueface actually lose it all, or did he just lose his grip on the moment? Because those are two very different things, and the answer matters more than the headlines want you to think. So let's go back to the beginning, lay out exactly how this thing built up, how it started slipping, and what the real financial picture looks like today versus what the rumors are claiming. Let's rewind to the era that made him. Blueface, real name Jonathan Porter, came out of Los Angeles with a sound nobody else was doing at the time. Offbeat delivery, almost like he was rapping slightly out of sync with the instrumental on purpose. And it shouldn't have worked, but it did. Tiana turned into the song that was inescapable. It was the kind of record that crossed over from hip-hop playlists into TikTok challenges, into remixes, into every corner of the internet at once. And once a record hits that level of saturation, the artist behind it stops just being a musician. He becomes a personality people want to follow every single day. That's exactly what happened with Blueface. The momentum from those early tracks didn't just give him chart success, it gave him a multi-platform career almost overnight. He was doing festival dates and packed shows. He was a fixture on social media, the kind of person whose live streams and posts generated their own news cycles. He stepped into the boxing world, headlining exhibition matches that pulled curious eyes well outside of hip-hop, because at that point, people weren't just listening to him, they wanted to watch him. And then came the reality television side of his career, which arguably made him even more famous than the music did. Relationship drama, public arguments, unpredictable moments, all of it played out in front of an audience that couldn't look away. Think about how unusual that combination actually was at the time. Most rappers in his position were focused on one lane, drop music, tour behind it, maybe pick up a brand deal here and there. Blueface was doing all of that while also stepping into a boxing ring for pay-per-view style events, while also becoming one of the more talked about figures in reality television, and while also keeping his personal life public enough that fans felt like they were watching a constantly unfolding storyline. That's not luck, that's a specific kind of internet era stardom when a person becomes more valuable as a character than as a musician. And for a few years, that strategy was working in his favor in every direction at once. It's also worth remembering how fast this all happened. We're talking about someone who went from a relatively unknown artist to a name everybody recognized within the span of a single year. That kind of speed creates its own problems down the line, because an audience that falls in love with you that fast often expects the next big moment just as quickly, and if it doesn't come, they don't wait around. But in the moment, nobody was thinking about that. They were thinking about how this one rapper had figured out how to be everywhere at once. Music, sports, reality TV, and social media all stacked on top of each other. Now here's why so many people assumed he was sitting on long-term wealth. When you're pulling income from that many directions at once, music royalties, touring, brand deals, boxing purses, reality show paychecks, social media monetization, it looks like diversification. It looks like a smart modern celebrity building a financial foundation that doesn't depend on one single hit record. And for a moment that assumption made sense. He bought property, he was associated with a heavily customized camo blue mansion in Chatsworth that he picked up around 2020 for roughly $1.22 million, a place that basically became part of his brand. A house people recognized from videos before they ever saw an address. He later picked up another property out in Canyon Country in the Santa Clarita Valley, a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom place built in 2018 that he purchased in 2019 for just under $1.25 million, complete with his own recording studio space. Fans saw the lifestyle, saw the headlines, saw the constant media presence, and concluded the bank account had to match the buzz. And honestly, that's not an unreasonable conclusion to draw from the outside. When somebody's house is a recurring character in their own content, When their live streams are pulling numbers most influencers will kill for. When they're headlining boxing cards and getting reality show paychecks on top of streaming royalties, it's easy to assume all of that adds up to generational wealth. The visible signs of success were everywhere. What's much harder to see from the outside is the other side of the ledger, the legal fees, the lifestyle costs, the way fame this loud tends to generate its own expenses just to maintain. But buzz and banked wealth are not the same thing, and that gap is exactly where this story starts to turn. So when did the slowdown actually begin? It wasn't one single moment. It was a slow shift in what he was known for. Somewhere along the way, the conversation around Blueface started moving away from music and toward controversy, public arguments, altercations, headlines that had nothing to do with a new song and everything to do with his personal life spiraling in public. And once that shift happens for an artist, the algorithm and the audience both start treating you differently. You're no longer the guy with the new record, you're the guy something dramatic just happened to. That pattern eventually caught up with him in a serious way. Blueface had a 2021 assault case tied to an incident at a venue, and he was initially given a suspended sentence with probation. But in January 2024, he turned himself in after violating that probation, reportedly tied to being caught with drug paraphernalia. A judge handed down a maximum of 4-year sentence. He ended up serving close to 2 years before being released in early November 2025. Now think about what that actually means for a career that runs on momentum. Almost 2 years with no new music, no touring, no consistent presence, while the entire industry kept moving at internet speed. That's the part casual fans don't always think about. In music, especially in a genre where trends shift practically by the month, attention is the most perishable resource an artist has. New names break out every single week. New sounds take over. The algorithm doesn't wait for anybody, and it definitely doesn't wait for someone who's been off the grid for 2 years. So even before a single financial number gets mentioned, you already have a structural problem. Time away equals lost relevance, and lost relevance equals lost income, because in this era, attention and money are directly connected. And it's not just that fans forget, it's that the entire ecosystem around an artist depends on continuous activity. Streaming platforms reward artists who keep releasing because the algorithm needs fresh content to push. Brand partnerships depend on the artist's relevance score staying high, and that score drops fast during long periods of silence. Touring opportunities dry up because promoters book based on current demand, not past hits. Even social media following, which felt unshakable during the peak years, quietly erodes when there's nothing new to engage with. So 2 years away isn't just 2 years of missed paychecks from new music, it's 2 years of every adjacent revenue stream shrinking at the same time, compounding on top of each other. There's also a psychological shift that happens with audiences during a gap like that. The version of Blueface that fans remembered going into prison, the viral hitmaker, the boxing personality, the reality TV main character, gets frozen in time. Meanwhile, the culture around him keeps evolving without him. New artists fill the exact space he used to occupy. New controversies become the thing people are talking about. By the time he was released, he wasn't just returning to the same industry he left, he was returning to a completely different attention landscape, one that had already replaced him several times over. Which brings us to the financial pressure stories that started circulating right after he got out. In December 2025, just about a month after his release, reports surfaced that Blueface had listed his Santa Clarita Valley mansion, the same custom property closely tied to his brand, for $1.25 million. According to TMZ and several outlets that picked up the story, the listing came through a LA-based real estate agent, and the price tag was notable for one specific reason. It was essentially what he paid for the property roughly 6 years earlier. Not a markup, not the kind of appreciation you'd expect from a celebrity-owned home in that market, just close to break even. To put that in perspective, this is a home that became one of the most recognizable rapper-owned properties online, the kind of place fans associated with countless live streams, music videos, and viral clips since it was built in 2018. It had a 2-car garage, a media room, an indoor fireplace, an outdoor fire pit and patio, the full package of a custom celebrity compound. Listing something like that at essentially the original purchase price, rather than holding out for what a branded content famous property might fetch from the right buyer, is the kind of detail that makes people pay closer attention. Now, to be clear, a house listing is not proof of financial collapse. People sell homes for all kinds of reasons: lifestyle changes, relocating, wanting a fresh start after a major life event like coming home from prison. That's a completely normal human reason to want to move. But the pricing and the timing are exactly why fans and reporters started connecting dots. A seller motivated to maximize profit holds out for the best offer, maybe waits months for the right buyer willing to pay a premium for the branding. A seller motivated to move quickly, fast enough to basically just recover what they put in. That's a different kind of urgency, and paired with everything else hitting at the same time, it's reasonable that people started asking whether this was about more than just wanting new walls to live behind. It's also worth noting that as of early 2026, the property reportedly still hadn't sold, which some reports attributed to the custom branding narrowing the pool of interested buyers, since not everyone wants to live in a house that's instantly recognizable from somebody else's old live streams. Because right around that same window, a separate financial story was unfolding, and this one had real legal teeth behind it. This goes back to an online feud with Soulja Boy. If you follow hip-hop internet drama at all over the past few years, you know these back and forths can get personal fast, and this one did. During a public dispute, Blueface made statements suggesting he was the biological father of a child that Soulja Boy shares with Jacqueline Martinez. Martinez didn't let that slide. In 2023, she filed a defamation lawsuit, claiming the statements caused her serious emotional and mental distress, including documented claims of depression, anxiety, panic attacks, and more. Blueface reportedly did not show up to participate in the case at all, and when a defendant doesn't engage with a lawsuit, courts don't just let it disappear. They move forward without him. Martinez was awarded a default judgment, the reported number being around $123,000, which with interest reportedly grew to more than $131,000. This is worth sitting on for a second because it shows something a lot of people online don't fully grasp about defamation cases. Choosing not to show up doesn't make the lawsuit go away. It actually makes the outcome worse because the other side gets to present their case completely uncontested. There's no pushback, no counter evidence, no negotiation on the number. The judge simply rules based on what's in front of them, and what was in front of them was an uncontested claim of real, documented harm. So the silence wasn't a neutral move. It was effectively conceding the case by default, and it locked in a financial obligation that didn't need to be nearly that large if it had been handled differently from the start. Then came the part that turned this from an embarrassing internet story into an actual financial event. In late December 2025, Martinez filed writs of execution with the sheriff's departments in LA and Sacramento counties to start collecting on that judgment. And according to multiple reports, a judge had already ordered that royalties collected on Blueface's behalf through performance rights organizations like BMI and ASCAP would be redirected to Martinez instead, specifically to satisfy that judgment. Sit with that for a second, because this is the part that matters way more than people give it credit for. We're not talking about a vague rumor of financial trouble. We're talking about an actual court order that can intercept music royalties, real income generated by his catalog, before it even reaches him, and reroute it to pay off a debt that started as an online argument. That's the clearest example you'll find of how internet drama doesn't stay internet drama. It can become a binding legal obligation that chips away at your income for years, long after everybody's forgotten what the original argument was even about. Every time one of his older records gets streamed, every time radio plays a track he's credited on, a portion of what should be landing in his account is instead being diverted somewhere else entirely until that judgment is fully paid off. So now we've got two stories happening at the same time. A house listed near break-even price right after coming home from prison, and a court-ordered royalty garnishment tied to a defamation case he didn't even bother to fight in court. Individually, either one could be explained away. Together, they paint a picture of an artist under real financial pressure, even if $0 is almost certainly an exaggeration of the actual number. Let's zoom out and talk about the bigger picture here, because this is where the real lesson of the story lives. Viral fame and financial stability are not the same engine, and they don't run on the same timeline. When Blueface was everywhere, the lifestyle that came with that fame, the property, the public image, the expectation of staying relevant through constant content, all of that gets expensive fast. And it stays expensive even after the income that funded it starts to slow down. That's the trap a lot of viral era artists fall into. The lifestyle adjusts to the peak earning years almost instantly, but very few people adjust it back down when things slow. Houses don't get cheaper to maintain. Public image doesn't get cheaper to keep up. Legal bills definitely don't get cheaper. And on top of that, you got reduced music output, going from a guy releasing new material and staying in rotation to someone whose biggest headlines for 2 years were about a courtroom and a prison sentence. That's a massive shift in what the algorithm and the fan base associate you with. Streaming numbers reward consistency. Tour revenue depends on having something current to promote. When both of those go quiet for an extended stretch, the revenue streams that depend on relevance don't just pause. In a lot of cases, they shrink permanently, because the audience has already moved on to filling that attention gap with someone else. There's also a quieter financial pressure that doesn't always make headlines but matters just as much, and that's the cost of simply being a public figure with an unstable image. Legal representation isn't free. Court appearances, settlements, ongoing obligations like the royalty garnishment, all of that drains resources steadily over time rather than in one dramatic hit. It's not the kind of thing that shows up as a single shocking headline. It's slow, consistent erosion, the financial equivalent of a leak rather than a flood. And those leaks add up especially fast when the income side of the equation has also slowed down at the same time. This is also a moment to talk about how short these viral windows really are in today's music landscape. Gen rotate fast, new regional sounds break out constantly. TikTok can manufacture a brand new star in a matter of weeks. So when an artist who built their entire identity around being the next big unpredictable thing steps away for 2 years, they're not just losing time, they're losing the cultural position they used to occupy. And that position gets filled immediately by somebody else. That's true whether you're talking about Blueface or honestly any artist who blew up fast off virality rather than off a steadily built fan base that sticks around through quiet periods. The artists who tend to survive these gaps are usually the ones who had a deeper musical foundation to fall back on, a dedicated audience that came for the artistry rather than just the moment. The artists who struggle most are the ones whose fame was built primarily on being unpredictable and constantly visible. Because once the visibility stops, there's less holding the audience in place. Now let's talk about everything else layered into this story. Because the downfall narrative isn't just music and money, it's also about image. The boxing exhibitions were a big part of how Blueface expanded beyond music in the first place, and that's worth remembering because it shows he was already experimenting with diversifying his brand years before any of this financial pressure became public. Stepping into a boxing ring as a musician isn't just a paycheck, it's a calculated bet that your celebrity alone can sell tickets and pay-per-view buys, regardless of how the fight actually goes. And for a while, that bet paid off for him. It also reflects a broader trend across hip-hop and internet culture, where musicians increasingly treat boxing exhibitions as a side hustle that capitalizes purely on name recognition rather than athletic skill. And Blueface was one of the earlier and more visible names to ride that wave. The reality TV chapter, especially the relationship drama that played out across platforms, kept him relevant to an audience that might not have even been streaming his music anymore. That's an important distinction because it means his fame had actually split into two separate audiences by a certain point. People who followed him for the music and people who followed him purely for the drama and the storyline, almost like a soap opera. Those two audiences don't necessarily convert into the same kind of revenue. Reality TV attention can pay through appearance fees and platform deals, but it doesn't automatically translate into streaming numbers or concert ticket sales the way genuine musical engagement does. And the public controversies, the altercations, the legal trouble, all of it kept his name circulating just under a completely different kind of spotlight than the one that made him famous in the first place. That's actually one of the more interesting parts of this whole story. Some artists go quiet and disappear from the conversation entirely. Blueface never fully disappeared. His name kept surfacing through scandal, through court updates, through family members posting cryptic hints about his prison release on social media that turned into their own news cycles. The attention stayed even while the income tied to making new music clearly slowed down. Which raises an uncomfortable question: is staying famous through controversy actually sustainable, or does it just delay the moment where the bill comes due? There's also the relationship side of his public life worth mentioning, since it kept generating headlines independent of anything musical. His relationships and the children involved have been a recurring subject of media coverage for years, and that kind of ongoing personal drama, while it keeps engagement high, also comes with its own costs, legal and otherwise, that rarely get factored into the public's perception of an artist's finances. Fame built that heavily on personal life exposure tends to generate exactly the kind of legal entanglements that eventually show up as court orders and judgments, the same way this story did with the Soulja Boy situation. There's another angle to this worth pulling apart, and it's bigger than just one artist. Blueface came up during a specific window in hip-hop, often called the viral rap era, where a song's success was measured less by radio spins and more by how quickly it spread across platforms built for short attention spans. That era produced a wave of artists who blew up almost overnight off a single distinctive sound or hook, and it's worth asking what tends to separate the ones who turn that into a lasting career from the ones who end up as a memorable but brief chapter in internet history. The artists who survive that transition usually do one of two things. Either they keep evolving their sound fast enough to stay technically relevant, releasing consistently enough that the audience never gets a real chance to forget them, or they lean into a completely different kind of longevity, becoming a cultural reference point, a name people still bring up years later, even without new music, almost like a nostalgia act that never has to chase the algorithm again. Blueface's path has been messier than either of those clean outcomes. He stayed culturally present, but mostly through controversy and legal headlines rather than through music, which keeps his name circulating without necessarily converting into the kind of revenue that built his fortune in the first place. This is also where it's worth mentioning the toll that public scrutiny itself takes on an artist's earning potential. Brand partnerships, sponsorships, the kind of corporate money that quietly funds a lot of celebrity wealth, those tend to dry up fast around an artist with an unpredictable legal history. Companies don't want their name attached to ongoing court cases, and that's an invisible revenue stream that disappears without ever making headlines of its own. So while fans are focused on the house listing and the lawsuit, there's likely a quieter loss happening in the background too. Opportunities that simply never got offered in the first place because of the risk involved. Since his release in November 2025, Blueface has reportedly been active again, dropping new music, getting linked to streaming collaborations, and reportedly being attached to a new dating show. That's not nothing. That's someone clearly trying to rebuild momentum rather than fade away quietly. Fans even noted he came home looking noticeably different physically, having put on weight while incarcerated, which became its own talking point and honestly worked in his favor in terms of generating renewed curiosity about him. The house listing might eventually sell. The royalty garnishment will presumably run its course once the judgment is satisfied, and none of that necessarily means the story is over. But a real comeback requires more than just being active again. It requires consistent output, not a single viral moment followed by months of silence. The artists who successfully rebuilt after a gap like this didn't do it with one comeback single. They did it by staying in the conversation week after week until the audience trusted they were actually back for good, not just testing the waters. It requires staying out of the kind of legal trouble that took 2 years off his career in the first place, because audiences are far less patient with a second disappearance than they were with the first. Forgiveness for one mistake is common in this industry. Forgiveness for a repeated pattern is much harder to come by, and the audience tends to lose patience faster the second time around. It also requires finding a way back into a cultural conversation that has moved on significantly since Thotiana first took over the internet. In a landscape where new artists break out on a weekly basis and old viral stars have to fight just to stay in the algorithm's good graces, that might mean leaning back into the unpredictable larger-than-life persona that made him famous in the first place. Or it might mean a more deliberate pivot toward consistent musical output that builds a sturdier, less headline-dependent fan base. Either path is possible, neither one is guaranteed, and both require something that's been in short supply over the last several years, which is sustained focus without another legal or personal crisis derailing the progress. So did Blueface really go from $15 million to zero? Probably not literally. That exact number doesn't hold up against the actual reporting. What's far more accurate is that the momentum slowed dramatically, the legal bills piled up, the royalty stream took a court-ordered hit, and the lifestyle built during the peak years didn't shrink at the same pace as the income did. That's not the same as losing everything, but it's also not nothing. And it's a much more honest way to understand what's actually happened to him than a clean, dramatic headline number ever could be. What do you think? Did Blueface lose the money, or did he just lose the moment? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want to see how the rest of this story plays out, stick around for what's coming next.